I'm pleased to have the opportunity to interview Congressman Lee Zeldin today. Congressman Zeldin grew up in Suffolk County, New York. Representative Zeldin graduated from the State University of New York in Albany and then Albany Law School, becoming New York's youngest attorney at the time of age 23. After completing the Army ROTC program, Mr. Zeldin served 4 years in active duty. Then in 2006, while assigned to the Army's 82nd Airborne Division, he was deployed to Iraq in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Following his service on active duty in 2007, Congressman Zeldin transitioned from active duty to the Army Reserve, where he currently serves as Lieutenant Colonel. In 2008, Congressman Zeldin opened a law practice in Smithtown, New York, which he operated full-time until he was elected to the New York State Senate in 2010, representing New York's 3rd Senate District. In 2014, following 4 years in the state Senate, Representative Zeldin was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, representing New York's 1st Congressional District. There, he serves on 2 committees, Financial Services and Foreign Affairs, where he serves as ranking member of the subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations. Congressman Zeldin resides in his hometown of Shirley with his wife Diana and their twin daughters Michaela and Ariana. Representative Zeldin is also running for governor of New York as the nominee of both the state Republican and Conservative parties. Mr. Zeldin is the first of the gubernatorial candidates to qualify for a place on the June 28th primary ballot. As such, we have invited him to our offices to participate in our candidate series. We'll be providing opportunities for other officially qualified candidates to come in and share their thoughts about their candidacy and the Empire State in the weeks to come leading up to that June 28th primary. We hope these interviews help you be an informed voter. Now, on to my interview with Congressman Lee Zeldin. Well, Congressman, it's good to have you in the office today. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, great to be with you.
Well, we've been enjoying and watching what's been happening with your race as you're working your way around the state. And today you're in Rochester, New York, so it's a great opportunity to have you here at the office. In the bio that I just shared, we mentioned your wife and your daughters, Diana, and then the daughters, Michaela and Ariana. And I know that when you were with us some years ago, you really shared a pretty touching story with your daughters. And I love to hear our audience connect with your family and know how they can pray for them and just be thinking of them. Would you mind recounting that tale for us?
Sure. My daughters, Michaela and Ariana, were born 14 and a half weeks early. They were less than 1.5 pounds when they were born. And I remember Diana going into labor in her 22nd week. And the doctors at Georgetown University NICU managed to keep the babies in her for about 3 weeks. So in the 25th week, they were born. First couple weeks, they both had lung surgery, intestinal surgery. When Michaela was about 2 weeks old, she weighed 2 pounds and she had an extra pound of fluid. She went into septic shock, and that has about an 80 to 90% mortality rate for her. While she was in septic shock, she had a stroke, and she wasn't doing well. Doctors sat Diana and I down and recommended that we discontinue treatment and that we let her go. They said, if she survives, she won't be able to see, walk, talk, and she'll have cerebral palsy. They weren't saying maybe, they said this is what's going to happen. Diana decided to, and we talked about it, we figured if she wasn't getting any better, but she wasn't getting any worse, she's clearly fighting. If she's going to fight, we're going to fight too. And we elected to do a very risky brain surgery on her. Diana and I went and said goodbye. We didn't know if we were ever going to see her again. We're in the waiting room. I remember the doctors, vividly remember, I'll never forget. The doctors come and they say that things went better than expected. She's not out of the woods, but it went better than expected. I remember Diana and I high-fiving each other. And the whole surgery, the whole incident left 1/3 of the left side of her brain a hole. But what's interesting is because she was only 2 weeks along, it's 27 weeks of brain development. The brain is still in many ways growing, and it recircuited itself around the hole. So she ended up with no long-term effects of what happened. She went to early intervention, the power of prayer, her will to live, I would say the girls' will to live, because Ariana went through a lot as well, and the miracles of modern medicine collectively. Now they're 15, they're finishing up 10th grade, they're doing really well, they're in all honors classes, getting better grades than I did when I was their age. And thank God for her fight and the fact that we just decided to put all of our faith in her and in that great team, and that she's now able to live. I was able to see life in the second trimester. And as we talk about these issues, it couldn't possibly be more personal for me, and to be able to share that personal story of what it's like to see a baby who's so small that their entire hand is smaller than the top third of your finger changed my life. And thank God Michaela and Ariana are still with us today. They're fighting, doing very well, and soon we'll be looking at college. And unfortunately, very soon they're going to be driving.
Well, it's funny how, we think about those moments that make a man. And certainly I think that was one of those in your life, that your values, which had always been there, became that much more solidified through that experience that you've gone through. It was fun for me because to be at an event with you and your family not too many weeks ago, to meet them for the first time. I have prayed for them for many years, and I pray for you and your family. And to actually be able to meet them and to see the girls and meet your wife Diana and just be able to put some flesh on names I've been praying for a lot of years was pretty exciting for me.
Thank you for all those prayers through the years.
Yeah. Well, let's get to some of the issues. So speaking of parents and parental rights, certainly here in New York there's been a lot going on. What can we anticipate as a parent in the Zeldin administration? What would parents be expecting from your administration in the years to come?
Parents have a fundamental right to control the upbringing of their child. Government needs to protect and defend that right and not infringe upon it. A decision by parents to send their kids off to school does not in any way relinquish that right. Some in government and education believe that if you send your kid off to school, that you're no longer in charge of the upbringing of your child. Now, when you push back on it, some on the left will say, well, if you feel that strongly, then you should homeschool your kid. Now, if you choose to homeschool your kid, that's fine. There's many different ways that our kids get educated around this entire state. But for some parents, you make the decision to send your kid off to school. Maybe you can't do it with work. Maybe you want your kid to be around other kids in that type of a school setting. That's a personal decision. I believe that parents should be as involved as possible in their kids' education. The best thing for a kid is for a parent to be as actively involved in their son and daughter's education as possible. I believe that the best thing for a kid's upbringing is for a parental unit to be as strong as possible. So as far as education goes, I very strongly believe that there's far more that we must be doing to have parents as involved as possible in their kids' education.
I remember some years ago when you were a new state senator at that time, and I remember I was a new lobbyist coming to Albany, and I was seated up in the Senate gallery, and I remember watching the floor, and there were senators that were moving around, and it wasn't uncommon for a senator been around for a few years to point to me to come down to have a word with them, and I would go down to the floor where they're at. But I remember this particular day because all of a sudden I felt a tap on the back of the shoulder, and it was you. You had actually come up to the gallery to talk to me about a school choice issue. And first, let me just say, I was so impressed with that you as a state senator would come up to the gallery to where I was to speak with me rather than just call for me or beckon me to come down. So I appreciate that, and I think that has spoken really of your humble heart. So many years ago, I think of that story often. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm the fourth ranking member of my house. I still serve in the Army Reserve, and I'm outranked by a bunch of people in the military. Constituents keep me grounded and honest. I remember when I first got elected to the state senate during orientation, somebody shared this story with me, and the group of all the senators who had just got elected, they say, you all may feel important and people call you senator and doors will get open for you that weren't previously open, but just keep in mind that one day you're not going to be here anymore. Yeah. And the day after you leave, someone's going to scrape the plaque off the outside of your door and no one's going to ever remember who you are. Okay, that puts some perspective on it. We're all people, we're blessed to be on this earth, to have life where we're all equals. All of us are equals. There's so many ranks that get thrown around and titles, and I understand when you're trying to accomplish a goal that it's good to have structure and dialogue and a chain of command, and I mean, I'm from the military, so I certainly respect and appreciate that. Some people, though, it gets to their head because they're empowered with a position that comes with more title, more responsibility in a particular situation, that somehow that makes them a better person. It doesn't make you a better person. You're still equals. You just have the honor, the privilege of being in that leadership position.
Yeah. Well, on that day, the topic that we talked about was school choice. And I'm still talking about school choice today, so I want to talk about a little more today. Two things. One, we mentioned the vaccine mandates, and not too many years ago, New Yorkers, even in their private schools, lost their religious exemptions to vaccine mandates. Is that something that in the Zeldin administration would get a second look?
Yeah, the religious exemption should have never disappeared. It should come back. I don't believe that the COVID shot should be required in order to attend school in the fall. That's a bill that's being considered right now up in Albany. I believe all COVID mandates should end. I believe that everyone who lost their job due to COVID should get their jobs back with back pay. Right now, as you and I are having this conversation, if you're under 5 years old in New York City, you're wearing a mask all day long still. I mentioned earlier about how my daughter Michaela was going through early intervention. We have kids, they're on the autism spectrum, they're learning how to speak, they're 3, they're 4 years old. The idea that the parent can't see the kid speak, their face, the kid can't see the teacher's face, the kid can't see other kids' face, it just doesn't add up as far as what's best for that student who's going through so much so young to be able to catch up to their peers. The idea that they would go through that whole experience all messed up doesn't make sense. With the teacher, student should be able to see each other's face when you learn how to talk. I believe in school choice. I don't want to hold any type of form of education back. Whatever decision a parent makes to send their kid off to school, I want that schooling to be as set up for success as possible. If you homeschool your kid, you should be set up for success as much as possible. You want to go off to public school? That's fine. I went to a public school. My daughters go to the same public school I went to. We have kids stuck in multi-generational poverty, stuck in poor performing schools. I believe that we should lift the cap on charter schools in this state. We should have educational savings accounts and tax credits for school choice and school vouchers, and we should provide every last possible opportunity for every student in this state, regardless of where you live, your wealth, your race, your ethnicity, anything. Everybody should be given the best possible chance for success. This isn't about the teachers union. It's not about the government. It's first and foremost, nothing is more important than that kid. And unfortunately, those kids don't get to vote. And because they don't get to vote, they end up getting held back. In some cases, you have kids that'll get used for 6 years as a guinea pig. There's so much needs to be improved about this school setting. I don't believe any school in New York should have critical race theory in it or anything like that at all, because they come up with new names now where you're pitting one student against another student based off of who they are. These kids were getting along just fine before those teachers and that agenda came into the classroom. I also believe that a lot of the material that's in schools, just with regards to sex education, is just not age appropriate. I remember the experience of going through sex education classes when I was a kid. The kids are learning the material much younger than when we went to school. I believe that we should only have age-appropriate material, and if you have a kid who has questions, there's content that they need to speak to somebody about, that they should be able to have that conversation. I also believe that parents should be involved in that. It shouldn't be happening behind the back of parents. But some kids, they develop earlier. They might have questions earlier, and it might be in the best interest of the kid, because that's what's most important, for that kid to have that setting. But that doesn't mean that you have to expose, when the first kid in class comes up with the first question, that everybody else automatically needs to get exposed to that question and answer. So that's something that's important to me as well. We should have advanced academics, which there's a push right now to get rid of it in the name of equity. We need to overhaul the school aid formula in the state. There's a lot to do with education to improve it in New York.
So stepping back, what do you think, as you're traveling the state, you're talking to people, I'm looking at polling that really across the political spectrum, people think New York are on the wrong track. We're heading in the wrong direction. What's the number one issue that people are talking about? What's the greatest thing that you see that's broken in New York that a Zeldin administration could address?
Right now, the number one issue is crime. I also hear people talk about education and freedom and their wallets, the economy. These are all top issues. But just to be honest, the number one issue that I hear about is that people are not feeling safe outside of their homes. They don't feel like Albany is looking out for law enforcement, that they're handcuffing the justice system instead of handcuffing criminals. I believe that cashless bail should be repealed. The mayor in New York City says that judges should have discretion to weigh dangerousness. I agree with them. I believe that judges should have discretion to weigh dangerousness and flight risk and past criminal record and seriousness of the offense when deciding what the appropriate amount of bail is. I believe that district attorneys should enforce the law. I would fire Alvin Bragg on day one. He refuses to enforce the law, and the governor of the state of New York has the constitutional authority to remove a DA who refuses to enforce the law. I believe that less is more should be overturned. There's so much that's happening right now in our criminal justice system that is making our streets less safe. And we just have to put law-abiding citizens back in charge of their streets, the subways, museums, businesses, and elsewhere. It's actually not that difficult of an issue to solve. We know what to do. I picked as my running mate, I asked Allison Esposito to run, and she came out of law enforcement. She was the commanding officer of the 70th Precinct in Brooklyn. She was on a trajectory like this. She would become a chief. Her father was a chief in the NYPD. And our team, and when I say our team, it is including congressional candidates and state Senate candidates and state assembly candidates, the whole statewide ticket, everybody, one team, top down, bottom up. We are all here about saving our state, saving our country. We want New Yorkers, anyone who comes to visit this state, to feel safe being able to walk our streets.
So, I'm listening to Governor Kathy Hochul, and she talked about when she came into office, there'd be collaboration and we'd work together. But, honestly, in my experience, I've seen nothing but top-down mandates that has come down, so I'm concerned about that. But honestly, even among Republicans, oftentimes members of the evangelical community get burned by Republican elected officials. If the people in my community are willing to trust you with their vote, what can they expect? One, how can they be sure that they're going to have confidence in that vote, you're going to do what you say you do? And second, what can they expect from that Zeldin administration?
Great thing is I have a voting record. And I also have people like the Reverend Jason McGuire, who knows me from years of being able to work together. So you're able to talk to people who you trust and say, okay, I heard about this guy, Zeldin. I heard that you met him. Tell me a little bit more about him. Or you can look at my voting record. So I am pro-life. I'm unapologetic about it. I will share my personal experience because that helped inform my perspective, but it also comes with a voting record. I could come into the House of Representatives and say that I want to strengthen the U.S.-Israel relationship, but in my fourth term now, as co-chair of the House Republican Israel Caucus, as one of two Jewish Republicans in Congress, having a record, it's a little bit easier on the number of issues that are really important to the evangelical community. They have gotten a chance to work with me, to know me, and I've been asked to cast that vote. At times, controversial votes, where you vote yay or nay. Other people, by the way, hide in the bathroom. Some people just don't even show up to vote at all. But time and again, I'm there, put my card in the machine, and vote my conscience. And I know that it's a record that I can be proud of in communicating with the evangelical community.
Well, Congressman, thank you for your time today. Certainly we'll be continuing to pray for you and your family and watching as this race unfolds throughout the rest of 2022.
All right, look forward to it. Thank you, Jason. Thank you for your leadership.